Hi everyone, and welcome to the second part of the Knitting for Beginners series. In the first part over on my blog, I talked about all of the tools and materials you're going to need to start knitting, and specifically what you're going to need for this course. I only go into the basics of each thing that you need, not like all the different kinds of, stitch markers and stitch holders and all these things that you won't really need until much later. So this part is going to be all about how you actually start knitting. The first part is casting on, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be using my interchangeable knitting needles here. These are an 8mm tip with a 16-inch cable, and this is what I'm going to be using for most of the series. And I also have some straight needles right here. These are 6mm, but I'm still going to be using them to show you just how you could follow this technique for casting on if you were using straight needles instead of circular needles. And then I have a crochet hook to show you one way to make casting on much easier if you're a beginner. I'm also going to be using the Bernat Softy Chunky yarn for this. You can use any yarn, but a good thick yarn is the best when you're starting out because it's easier to see the stitches and manipulate them then. So let's get started. So there are a couple different types of ways to cast on. The most common one that you're going to see in most patterns is the long tail cast on, and that's the first one most people learn. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. Here I have my yarn, and this is the tail end, the yarn that's just hanging out. And I'm going to take a couple of inches, I'm going to take maybe about 1.5 feet, and create my slip knot in the middle. So you're just going to do that by folding the yarn in half, twisting it so you have an X shape, grabbing the yarn through the hole and pulling it. That is your slip knot. Now we're going to take our needle and we're going to put it through the hole, the loop of our slip knot, and we're going to pull it to tighten it just like that. Now that we have our yarn, we have our tail yarn right here. That's the loose end, and the working yarn that's still attached to the ball. To begin our cast on, we're going to grab the tail yarn with our pinkies right here, and we're going to hold our working yarn over our thumb, and then just use our index finger to separate the two like that. See, now you're holding the two yarns with your 3 fingers. The working yarn is over your thumb, and your index finger is holding the tail yarn like this. Okay, now we're just gonna take our needle, go underneath this first loop, go over the next loop, pick it up, and bring it through. And that's one stitch casted on. Let's do that again. We're going underneath, then over, and through. See how you have more stitches now? We're going to keep doing that until we have as many as we need. And since right now we're just practicing, just keep adding stitches until you kind of get comfortable with that motion. So again, we're going to go underneath, over, and through. And then you're going to just pull this excess loop here. Just going to pull that to tighten it up to where you want it. So you make a nice little row of stitches right here that you're casting on. So let's do 10. And as you practice, you're going to get faster at it, and they're going to be more even and better just because you've practiced. So if they're a little bit uneven right now, that's okay, just keep at it. So let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's do 3 more. 8, 9, and 10. Okay. There are your first 10 stitches cast on. Now the reason I like working with a cable needle like this, like an interchangeable one, is because the more stitches I work, they're just going to end up on this cable part, and that's going to hold the stitches. You can even see I can just move them over and they'll still be right here. With a straight needle, however, you only have a certain amount of room to work with. So let me show you on that now. Here I have one of my needles, and because I am working with a smaller needle, I'm also going to be using some thinner yarn to go with that. So again, I'm going to make my slip knot. I'm going to cross over, grab the yarn, and pull it through. That's my loop. I'm going to take my needle and put it through the loop, and then pull on the yarn to tighten it. And the knot is going to be right up next to the needle. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hold our working yarn and our tail yarn so that they're separated like this, and we're holding the ends in our hand. Okay, and now this needle, as you can see, is a little bit different. It's just a straight needle, and then there's this end right here that tells you the size and everything. So you've got plenty of space to add stitches here, but there's still only a certain amount we can add before the needle will get full. But we're going to do the same thing. Going to go under and over and through. And then we're going to pull it to tighten it. Under and over and through. And this is the long tail cast on. Okay, so we have a couple stitches here now. If you were to fill this needle up, if say you're making something bigger like a blanket, this needle would be really hard to work with just because your blanket would only be this long. There wouldn't be much space to it unless you did it in parts and then join them all together. And with cable needles, you can always add more cables to make it longer and longer until it's the right length for you, which is why I like working with them so much better than with straight needles. You can do the same thing, the job the same way, and it'll be perfectly fine. But for me, cable needles are just easier, which is why I'll be using them for the rest of this. So I just want you to know that as you're working, if you're using straight needles, you can copy everything I'm doing and just use what you have. You don't need to splurge on the more expensive cable needle or interchangeable needles. So we have the same cast on here, and as you can see, these are always going to stay straight on the needle. They're not going to go anywhere because there's an end here. So yeah, that's it for the long tail cast on. I am going to show you a couple different methods, but for now, practice this cast on and just get really good at it. Try to make your stitches as even as you can, and I will show you some other things later. Another type of cast on I want to show you guys is the knitted cast on, and this is moving into like how you actually start the first stitches when you start knitting, but it's still a good stitch to learn, or a good cast on method to learn, because it makes a much stretchier and even cast on edge than the long tail cast on does. And the second way I'm going to show you how to do this using a crochet hook is actually a lot easier for some people. So even if the long tail cast on is a little bit tricky to kind of get that maneuver right, and you know how to crochet, then the knitted cast on might be a little bit easier for you to do using a crochet hook. But first, let me show you the knitted way to do it. So again, I have my slip knot already on my needle, and I was holding it like this before, as you can see, but now I'm going to move this to my other hand. So I have my needle, oops, let's move this out of the way. So I have my needle in my left hand and I have the empty needle on my right hand. I'm going to insert the right needle into the loop that's already here, our slip knot. Grab your working yarn, the one attached to the ball still, wrap it around the needle, and pull it through that first loop. And you have one loop here. And you're just going to go and put that loop back onto the needle. So now you have two loops here. Let me show you that again. You're going to insert your right needle through your stitch, yarn over, which is bring your yarn over the needle. You can see it's caught there. You're going to pull it through along with your needle, and you're going to bring up that loop. Then you're just going to put that loop back onto the needle. You can see how you cast it on 3 stitches this way. You can continue on for as long as you need until you get the number of stitches you need. And always make sure to pull your stitches back so they get snug in like the right diameter of your needle. That's going to make sure they're all even because they're all going to be the same width of your needle. We have 4 stitches here. So I'm going to leave this here for now and show you how to do that with a crochet hook. So I'm going to just drop this needle for now, because we're not going to use it. And say we were doing this was like, ignore these stitches and pretend this is our first stitch right here. If we wanted to create more, this is a crochet hook in the same size as an 8mm crochet hook. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to insert it into that stitch, bring my yarn over, and pull it through. It's the same thing, but it's a little bit easier to do because of the hooked end. It grabs your yarn better. So I'm going to leave my hook still in this loop and tighten it with it still on, and then just wrap around and pull it through. For me, it's much easier to do it this way with the hook because the hook just grabs the yarn for you and you don't have to worry about it slipping off, which is really handy when you're starting out. And then when you're done, you can just take your needle out, your hook out, and check out your stitches. And you can see that they are made exactly the same as your other stitches. All of these are done the same way. And that is a knitted cast on. Okay, I have one more cast on method to show you guys, and that is the provisional cast on. This is also called a crocheted cast on, and it's super easy to do if you already know how to crochet, and even if you don't, it might be easier to pick up than the other two. So for this, we're going to start with a slip knot, just like we did for all the others, but we're going to put the slip knot on our crochet hook. I already have a crochet hook that's the same size as my needles, so this is an 8mm hook. I'm going to put it through there, and here is the tail end. So we're just going to let the tail end just hang right there. Okay, so for this, what we're basically going to do is create slip knots, or slip stitches, onto our needle using our crochet hook. So I have my working yarn behind the needle and a slip knot on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull it through the slip knot. Okay, that's one stitch. I'm going to bring the yarn back behind the needle, and again yarn over and pull it through the loop that we have on our hook. And we're just going to keep doing that. If you're already familiar with crocheting, you can see that this is just a slip stitch made around a needle. So we're just going to yarn over and pull through. Again, bring the yarn behind the needle, yarn over, and pull through. Just like that. Let's do one more. And when you've done your last one, you're just going to bring that last loop onto the front of the needle. So here you go. Actually, put this on facing the other way. There we go. See how easily I just created 8 stitches right there? The difference with this is that you get this edge here that looks like a chain stitch, and when you learn to bind off later on, you'll see that that edge is really how the bind off looks too. You get a nice like knitted edge. It's a clean edge here. So you can start off like this. This is also used when you want to create a different color for your main piece and you want to start with something that's removable. So for example, it's called a provisional cast on because you can easily remove this at the end. Basically what that means is, say I wanted to start my project with one color and I wanted to work a little bit and then come back and work the other way. To work the other way, I would need to have those stitches live, and to do that I start with a provisional cast on like this, work my piece, and then I can come back and remove this so that I have open stitches to work with later on. That might not make any sense right now, but it will eventually when we get to that part of our lessons. And for now, just practice using different cast on methods. Okay everyone, thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned how to work a cast on method that works for you. For my series, this Knitting for Beginners series, I also have a written post that goes through all of these cast on methods in a little bit more detail and with step-by-step pictures if you want to follow along with that. You can find that over at theblueelephants.com, or if you're reading already on the post, then this video is just already part of the post, so you don't have to worry about that at all. I'm going to be using the first cast on that I showed you, the long tail cast on, for most of my projects. It helps to know the other ones in case this one's a little bit too tricky, but really anything is going to come with time and practice, so just keep at it. This is the long tail cast on right here on both needles. This is my thick needle that I showed you with the 8mm, and this is the 6mm needle. It's the same thing, just a smaller needle. Is it 6? I've been saying 6. I think it's 4. Yeah, this is a 4mm. I've been saying 6. Just practice the cast on methods, and I'll be back next time to show you how to start knitting by learning the knit stitch, and we can begin creating our first project after that. Thanks so much for watching, and if you aren't already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe down below, or follow me on my blog and subscribe there, where you'll also get weekly updates of new patterns and tricks and techniques and anything I share on the blog, along with some freebies that are only for subscribers. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.